All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome back to the Boca Podcast. I am your host, Nathan Holritz, and it is a wonderful opportunity to be here with you today. Thanks for hanging out with us. And for those of you who are watching live, please don't hesitate to ask questions, comment, share your thoughts, send us funny emojis, whatever you prefer to do, but engage with us. I do want this to be a two-way street, a conversation. For those of you listening to the audio version after the fact, do know that we stream our podcast episodes live now, and if you follow us at Boca Podcast, you can actually keep up with when those upcoming live streams are going to be. We may eventually work toward having a consistent schedule for the live streams, certain days of the week, certain times, but for the time being, we're kind of making it happen on the fly. I am lucky enough today to have with me not only Kanayo, I'll call you a new friend because we've yet to have the opportunity to really get to know each other, but not only a friend, but also a fellow photographer and a super talented photographer at that. Kanayo Adibe is with me. Thanks, Kanayo, for hanging out with all of us today.
Thanks, Nathan, for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, and this is one of those situations where there's a little bit of I guess I sit here in a little bit of awe of Kanayo's work because as a photographer, Kanayo, I was never the artist type. I photographed for over 10 years. I shot hundreds of weddings, engagement sessions, and so forth. But I never had the opportunity to, I guess, develop the craft. I never had the passion to develop the craft as an artist. I was more thinking about it as a business. And I have to say that your work is more along the lines of art, and I'm a little bit envious of that.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah. A lot of my inspiration for actually becoming a photographer started from wanting to be able to express myself creatively. So I definitely take the artistic approach to it. And I by default ended up being someone who earned an income from photography. So the art has always been the inspiration for the photos.
Well, it is that. And let me actually share my screen here for everybody listening in. I want to actually show you, for those of you who are, I say watching, I should say watching, those of you who are listening, you're going to want to come back and look at the video. And of course, you can go to Kanayo Adibe, KanayoAdibe.com. But Kanayo's work is just stunning. And what we're going to actually focus on today is the way that his street photography has influenced his wedding photography. Because if we go to, on Instagram, Project Asphalt, you'll see this stunning work. Kanayo, maybe you can just comment on this as I'm scrolling down here. It's just beautiful stuff. And forgive me, one more. Oh, there we go. We had a little audio issue. Say that one more time.
I was like, thank you very much. So yeah, my street photography. I mean, it's it's been really great to experience street photography. And when I first started shooting, I actually started with street photography because I got my first camera, and there's this saying that the streets are always posing. So like it's harder to find models and then when you just start out, actually, when it's harder to find models and weddings. But with street photography, there are always people available. So as a way to learn my camera and get proficient with image making, I took to the streets. And a lot of what I learned from streets kind of like got put back into the weddings. For one thing, I got really comfortable with, I call it variability and chaos, because the streets has no true order to it. Like it's just a whole bunch of random things happening and random people. But after when you learn how to find order and actually make images that you actually want to make, like versus take random pictures of things, but actually find ways to create images that you want to make with the randomness of the street. When you develop that skill set, you're able to like show up to a wedding and you can literally see a wedding that's a more scripted environment, because we kind of know how weddings play out. Every wedding is almost this is slightly different from the other, but the script is the same. We know the bride is going to walk down the aisle, we know the groom might cry, or we know the mother of the bride might cry. So when you go from a situation where everything is chaotic and you learn how to find order in that chaos, you take that skill set to a wedding, and it's just you see everything that's happening because your senses are heightened, and you're able to like pick up on little things happening in corners that the average photographer won't even notice because they're so focused on looking at the main characters in the scene. So some of that stuff is what has helped enhance especially the documentary side of my weddings.
That makes sense. And again, for those of you listening in, what we're going to be focusing on today is this conversation around not just street photography, but the way that street photography has ultimately affected Kanayo's work. We're going to talk about what makes good street photography and then how that translates to wedding photography. More specifically, as Kanayo was just alluding to, Kanayo, you mentioned ahead of time, actually not even ahead of time, I think I was actually on your Instagram page. It says documenting the human condition. It seems to be maybe this is the definition that you give street photography, or would you give it a different definition?
So, I think it's the definition that I give my street photography, because I think, street photography is very broad, and some people don't even, they don't necessarily focus on the human element, the human aspect of it. Sometimes they just create images that are designed, more aesthetic images. Some people focus heavily on documentary. Some people just, focus on things happening on the street that don't really have, that the human doesn't necessarily play a picture in the overall image. But for me, my street photography, as aesthetic as it might be or designed as it might be, there's always a human element to it. And, there's certain things that I focus on when making those pictures. So
what initially drew you to this idea of street photography? I mean, did street photography come before weddings or vice versa?
It started off with street. But when I first started off with street, I wasn't shooting street photography the way I shoot it today. It was more random photos. Then I learned, over time, I learned how to make pictures on the street and how to make more, be more, what's the word I'm looking for? Be more thoughtful, have more intention,
Sure.
Create photos on the street with more intent.
Yeah.
So it's evolved since the original start, in the streets, but it definitely came before our weddings.
It's interesting that you talk about intention, because I think for a lot of people, including myself in some cases, when we look at the work of other street photographers, maybe not so much the stuff that I'm seeing on your Instagram page, but some of the street work that I've seen over the years has in some ways felt a little bit random. But you would suggest that there is very, very much intention there. Well, I guess if you were to break it down, what would you say percentage-wise is the split between that intentionality and then maybe just a little bit of luck in the moment?
So there's so I think it's a combination of both, right? Like with street photography, I feel like you kind of make your own luck, right? Like I'll give a rough example. Say you're standing, you see a wall that's red, right? And you want somebody in red clothes to walk by,
Sure.
right? You see that, so you make an image with a person in red, with a guy a person in red walking by a red wall with a red car, right? And the viewer looks at that image and thinks, oh wow, they were lucky. They just happened to see that and take that one picture and make that shot. However, that person could have stayed there for 2 days or came back several weeks trying to make that image till the day everything lined up. So you never, as a viewer, you never see the process behind the one image that seemed very lucky. But if you ask me, someone who spends days trying to make a certain image, that was intention, right? Like one day they did get lucky because they kept at it. They kept coming back to make that one picture, and one day everything lined up where they made that one picture, and that day they were lucky. However, the days that led to it was the intention, and they dreamt of that image, and eventually that image happened. So that's just a rough, there's so many images that happen that are like seem very lucky, but a lot of the times the process behind it is not luck but intention and
Yes.
you know long suffering, leading up to that point where the luck happens,
Yeah.
so
That actually totally makes sense. And the reason I laugh too, because when you say long suffering, I was making this comparison between what you were saying about good street photography and the significance of intention versus luck, and my experience in the last year learning how to day trade. Because a lot of people would say, getting into the marketplace and day trading it's lucky. You're just, you're gambling, it's luck, and if you do well, you're lucky. And obviously that's not the case. There's actually quite a bit of strategy that goes into it. And now, if I'm doing it right, I have, not only do I have a clearly outlined strategy, but I'm following that strategy and I set very intentional goals. If I get so, quote unquote, lucky, maybe I make a little bit extra in the moment. But what I do make, how I do walk away with profit comes from intentionality. It comes from strategy, and it does come from a lot of long suffering as well. So that was kind of an interesting comparison that I was making in my head.
yeah, it's definitely it makes totally sense to like when you put it that way and draw those two comparisons. It's very similar. Like, you know, they say luck is half. I think I forget the same. I think it's like luck is a percentage preparation, and I think it's like 90% preparation and 10% actual luck or something. I forget
Right.
the actual saying, but there's a saying that actually makes the statement that luck isn't necessarily luck. Oh, I think it's 90%. Something about opportunity and preparation.
Yep.
It's luck.
Yep.
Yeah, I forget the percentages, but yeah. So that's basically what it is.
Well, so let's talk about maybe if you were to pick, say, three of the most important elements of good street photography. And of course, we're going to connect this to the idea of wedding photography here in just a second. But looking specifically at street photography, what would you say are the top two or three elements of good street photography, at least from your perspective?
So light, composition, and moment. And I think this translates through it's not just with street, but like it goes into every other human focused genre of photography.
Great. I'm taking notes here. Light.
Composition, and moment. Those three things. So a
Okay.
lot of the moment is gestures and things like that. But yeah, go ahead. You can ask the question.
Well, I was going to say, so excuse me, so when we talk about light, what's the first thing that comes to mind when you talk about this idea of being intentional as a street photographer? What are you doing intentionally with light?
So light could be what dictates the scene that I pick for street. So there's a method of street that's called the fishing method, where you literally find the scene that you want to photograph in. And like I had mentioned, the red wall, for instance, but here it could be like a nice pocket of nice light, maybe something that's very contrasty, big, highlight, a nice highlight and like a lot of shadows or something. So you first identify that the light that you want to use. Then you can now form a composition around it. You see the scene, and that basically sets the scene. You have a nice composition, nicely framed composition, and maybe a nice beam of light. Then the moment is you want a gesture or a reaction, which now brings in the human element. So you want a person performing a certain kind of act or giving off a certain kind of emotion, or a gesture that's calls the viewer's attention. So now you set the scene, you have the scene, the composition, and you wait for a person that gives you the reaction or wearing the outfits or performing some kind of gesture that you want to come into that frame, and you make your picture right at the time you want to make it. So in a sense, you design that image, and you actually make the image that you envisioned in your head versus snapping something that just is randomly occurring.
That makes a lot of sense, actually. And again, there is the intentionality, the understanding, the skill set that drives the behavior, especially as it relates to light, composition, and being ready for the moment. It seems like the light and the composition build up. You're thinking about light and composition, and there is a certain amount of intentionality there, and then there's a readiness for that moment when it happens, and then you capture that frame. Is that kind of how it looks?
Absolutely. That is exactly what it is.
So let's then translate that to the wedding photography. And what at this point, like what percentage of your photography career, say in a year, is made up of wedding photography versus street photography? Is the wedding photography what is ultimately driving your business, making you money, and street photography is more of a hobby, or how do you break that down?
So, street photography, I consider it to be a palette cleanser for my weddings.
Ooh, I like that.
Um, it's so I use that as my true creative outlet. Like initially, you start off as a when you start off in wedding photography, as a young photographer, you have all these dreams and wanting to be different and the best and all of that, and bring your flavor and it's all about you. Then you get hit with checks and expectations of the industry, and then you have to. It seems like sometimes you have to conform because if when money comes into the picture, you're not. It stops really being about you, right? And I mean, some people are fortunate to have client base that 100% don't give them input and just say do what you want to do. But the way business works with planners and other people in between, even between the clients who might be 100% fine with you doing what you want, but planners have their own expectations because it's all business and money driven. You start to lose a little bit of your creative control and start to
Hmm.
cater to other people. So that became really stressful for me because, like I said, I did not start off as a business. I started off as somebody who wanted creative outlets and just thought it was awesome that people wanted to pay me to express myself creatively. Um, so because of that, I started taking to street photography, which is I am the client at this point now because it's all about what I want to do, and
Yeah.
I can make images however I want to make it, and the images are always available. The players are always there. I just need to go outside, um, and that's became my palette cleanser for if I'm experiencing, if I just want to express myself, I'm experiencing stress from weddings and stuff like that. So, um, as far as the breakdown goes, yes, weddings are majority of my, form majority of my income stream through photography. I mean, and all the other lifestyle stuff that are kind of associated with weddings,
Sure.
maternity and, engagement sessions. But fortunately, street photography has also created its own income stream. Like it just randomly did. So I've had commercial work that have several commercial jobs that have come as a result of my street photography work. I've worked with clients like Nordstrom and a few others, done advertisements and stuff like that. And I've also sold prints.
Got
I've
it.
had work in galleries and stuff like that. So it has created its own income stream, but it's not as constant as the weddings. Weddings is a year round thing. So that's kind of the breakdown for that.
That makes sense. So, would you say, this is kind of backtracking just a little bit because it was something I was thinking about earlier, but I know you said you started in street photography, then it was wedding photography, and we're going to talk about how that influences your wedding photography in just a second. But what were the initial inspirations, I should say, with regards to street photography? Who were you looking to? Whose work did you find inspiration from? Did you take classes? Where did this street photography originally come from for you?
Um, so right at the beginning, there was no one. It was really just there are people on the street. I want to use my camera. I'm just gonna go out there and do stuff. Um, and then I started to notice. I'd shoot like I'd go online and just do random research on how do you t- make pictures on the street. Like what do you do? And
Sure.
everybody has their guidelines. They talk about composition and photograph people doing stuff. So I'll just walk around and just randomly, if someone is like playing sports or something, like they're skateboarders or something, I'll photograph them doing that.
Yeah.
Then as time went on, I started to get exposed to more actual street photographers. My favorite actually is James. I think it's Natchway is how you pronounce his name.
Yeah.
He's a war photographer, and
Mhm.
he photographs probably the worst things in the world so beautifully. And
Mm.
he's almost like a fine arts. He has a fine arts, really, really. when I say graphic, like composition rich, framing, lighting, it's all amazing. But he's photographing like some of the most horrific things you can see. But these are like beautiful pictures of bad things because
Sure.
war is bad, and but I love that he could he still like approached his documentary from a artistic standpoint, because at the end of the day, for me, it's all about the art expression. It's being able to like create visually striking imagery.
Yeah.
And so he was a big one. Then there's Bruno Barbe. He's a Magnum photographer. I'd seen his work, and he also is a composition. He's all about the composition. So if you look at my work, you can tell like there's a lot of thoughts that goes into my compositions. Either street or weddings. It's very graphic in essence, visually striking.
Mm-hmm.
And that's kind of like even the master Henry Cartier-Bresson. He's another person who creates visually striking imagery. So anyone who has really rich compositions is someone that I would not naturally gravitate to. But those were the three people when I saw their work that kind of like made me realize that, hey man, you can actually, because images that are composed really well, you almost feel like, it kind of like is baffling, because it's like, how did he know this was going to happen? This random act was going to happen, and he had enough time to actually frame it the way he did. You know what I mean? And that's kind of like one of the things about the whole fishing method that I thought. So I learned about those kind of things and how you anticipate the moment and you wait for something to happen versus quick snaps. Because when you do a quick snap, all the other things don't fall into place. The lighting could be bad.
Right.
The composition could be bad, you know what I mean? And you might just be chasing a moment, but not really thinking about all the other pieces of the puzzle.
Mm-hmm.
So I learned about that after looking at those guys and their work. And that's where a lot of that inspiration came from.
Well, and I have to say too, as we're talking about that composition, I'm going to pull up your Instagram account again here. 1 second. So what I'm seeing here, I mean, we talk about the composition, for example, this image, and for those of you listening in, you're going to want to either come back and check out the video or at least go to Kanayo's Instagram account, which is Kanayo, Kanayo _Adibe, Adibe. And of course, we'll link to this in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But this image right here, I'm assuming this is a bride who is about to step into her dress. Is that right? I mean, this is stunning.
Absolutely, it is. Thank you. Yeah, it's definitely a bride stepping into her dress. I don't even know where I got the inspiration for that, but actually, yeah, I don't know. I tried that before in one of my weddings, but this was like it was my first wedding. I tried that, but I was still learning, right? So I didn't know about how, I have this thing where I say lenses are paintbrushes, right? They're like paintbrushes where every lens has a purpose or has its strengths, right? And being able to understand your lenses and see them as really just paintbrushes or tools to get the job done or get certain types of images. I shot that the first time with a 50mm lens, and it just didn't look the same. So when I learned about how wide angles really help change perspective and show different lens, a 20mm at this time, and it was a totally different image. I really created an image that really showed how I feel expressed or showed how it feels to be a bride. This grand gesture of a bride putting on her dress. I feel like it was captured better with that lens, and it gave the feel that I wanted the viewer to feel.
Oh, it's stunning. And again, for those of you listening, and I've got it pulled up on the screen here, it's just we talk about the combination, or Kanayo, you talked about the combination of the intention behind the shot. You know what you were looking for. You are there and ready for the image, and then you snap that frame at the moment that, in this case, the bride happens to also be smiling. You can see her foot about to step through that hole in the dress, but you have the perspective of the dress surrounding it. And of course, that naturally draws the viewer's eye to the middle of the image where it's in focus. I mean, it's just, the combination's absolutely amazing.
Thank you, man. Thank you very much.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful work. Well, again, we're going to link to both the Instagram accounts actually in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But Kanayo, before we get to some rapid fire questions here, I want to ask more specifically. I know you kind of alluded to this a little bit earlier, but let's talk specifically about what is inspiring you from your street photography? What elements, I guess I should say, you're taking specifically from your street photography to the wedding day as you're going through that day, whether it's preparation like we just saw now during the ceremony or portraits, maybe later on during the reception? Are there two or three big ideas that you're taking, maybe in addition to that light composition moment, that you're taking to the wedding day that you have learned from your experience as a street photographer as well?
So I think the main things are composition and moment. However, there are skills that are built. Like, I feel like as a street photographer, the more you shoot on the street, your situational awareness actually is developed. Like you see things, and it's like you see everything happening at the same time. And that is when you develop that kind of skill set, that is something that is very, very useful in the wedding day. Like it's one of those things where it allows you to be able to see what's happening with the bride and groom, but also see what's happening with the guest at the same time. So you can create these stories and create layered shots where you link emotions that are happening on this side with the bride and groom to like an emotion of somebody in the sitting in the audience viewing them. You can It's like seriously heightened. And that's the thing about being in the street, and there's like just so many random things happening, but you're able to like find stories and piece things together. So I think beyond the light composition and moment, I think this heightened sense of your heightened senses and your ability to pull link stories is like one of the biggest benefits I have had. I've seen from being a street photographer.
Well, I like the fact that we've really brought it back to those three elements. I'm a bit of a minimalist. I like to look at things very, very simply. At times that kind of bites me a little bit, but I think that many times we tend to overcomplicate life just as human beings and certainly as photographers. So I like that you can bring it back to these big ideas, because I can imagine as a photographer, I mean, I shot for about 10 years. I'm not currently actively shooting, but if I were to go back to start photographing weddings, for example, every time I put that camera up to my eye, I can imagine running those three words through my head, and it would be such a great frame of reference, a structure within which to photograph. There's freedom in it, especially because it creates a certain amount of readiness, and there's certainly intention innate to it. But if I constantly have those 3 points in my head, running through my head at all times, I can imagine I would just be that much better a photographer as a result.
Yeah, it definitely changes the game because I've seen people, like I do mentorship and stuff like that, and I've had people show me images when I'm critiquing them, and I'm like, you have one or two of these elements in here, but if you had the third one, or see how it changed. Your lighting isn't that good, but your composition is decent, and you have a moment. But imagine if the light was this way, and how much it will elevate that image. So once you have this, that's the formula. I think those three things, and your image becomes impactful, I believe. And the other, the heightened awareness thing is just a way to expand the types of images you can make, and the kinds of stories you can include in your photographs.
Well, Ed, we're going to put these points for everybody as a point of reference in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. And shout out to Jill, who produces our show, who puts together the show notes for all of these episodes. If for those of you listening in or watching, you're not taking advantage, make sure you go to bokehpodcast.com. You can see the current episodes that we have out. We actually have close to 500 episodes out now. And thanks to Kanayo, who is adding to that just wealth of information. But along with each of those episodes, there are show notes as well. So make sure that you take advantage of those for everybody listening in and watching. So Kanayo, I want to jump from this conversation around street and wedding photography and their relationship to a few rapid fire questions here before we finish up, if I can. Something we talk a lot about here on the Bokeh Podcast is brand position, or what the unique value proposition of your business is. How would you position yourself in the market that you're currently in? And maybe go ahead and mention the marketplace that you're currently working in as well.
So I'm a DMV photographer, so I primarily service the DMV, but I do travel for weddings. As far as my brand, so I think so what I get back from clients, I feel like I am my brand in a sense, because a lot of these are wedding photography companies are essentially one man run, a lot of them. Some people have been able to build up a studio with several photographers, but for a lot of us, we are essentially our brand. And with the way social media works these days, and people are looking, potential clients are looking at you, the person. So I feel, you know, me being that I'm a different, everybody's different. We're all different people. We all have different styles, different tastes, different likes. And I feel like what makes my brand different is the fact that it's me, right? And not as much as my imagery differs from the next guy, I don't feel like I make work that I feel like. So one of the compliments I get a lot of times is that people see like they're scrolling on Instagram and an image shows up and they can tell it's my image before they see who posted it, right? So, and that's something I've heard like my whole career, so it's like, I think, a lot of clients who find me really come to me for my work. It's never really about how inexpensive I might be compared to the next guy, or how
Sure.
much more I cost compared to the next guy, but it's usually because they've seen my work and they don't see anything else like it.
Mm.
Um, and beyond that, I feel another thing is my customer service. Like so I worked in the corporate world in IT, and we are very responsive people. Like that's something I was, as a customer service person within IT, because IT is primarily customer service. You're always serving the users of your application or
Sure.
infrastructure. So one of the things I get from clients is how responsive I am. Like, I literally respond to anything as soon as I see it. Some people put things on the back burner and do other things, but every time is, I thank you for getting back to us so quickly. Thank you for getting back to us so quickly. And a lot of times,
Hmm.
even after they have booked me, the communication process is really good. I'm equally as responsive, when I'm trying to get a job get a booking from them, as well as when the booking has been done and we've shot and they're asking for their images. I'm still that, as responsive. So, um, I believe that really sets me apart. Based on the feedback I've gotten, because it's like, if everyone is mentioning how responsive you are and how great your customer service is, it must mean that they don't see a lot of that around. So
Can I ask you about that? Because
yeah,
I find that very interesting. In a world where kind of instant gratification via a text message or a DM from Instagram or Messenger or whatever it might be, this is the norm for us. We're used to engaging that way with our friends, family, or otherwise. You're bringing that to bear with your clients, which I think is really interesting. I know that in some ways we could probably all do a little bit better job of that. But how do you balance being so responsive with also not getting sucked into your phone or computer all the time? Or is that even really a concern for you? Have you found that it's a problem that you're doing that too much? It's taking up too much of your time.
internet's question. So in the world we live in today, I mean, we are sucked into our phones. Like, this is the new world. Like,
Sure.
everybody's on Instagram every day. Like, if anything, I'm actually not on Instagram as much as the next guy. So
Okay.
that might actually free up time for me to talk to my clients, right? Like, if you make money from Instagram, which a few people do, I know a booking can come via Instagram, but if like you're an influencer and your actual revenue comes from being on Instagram, then I get dedicating all that time to it, right? But for me, a lot of my inquiries come from my website. Like, people find me
Hmm.
through Google and stuff like that. And so I don't spend a lot of time on social media just to be on there. I'm there for when it counts, to post when I post, respond to anything to help boost the post and stuff like that. But I don't spend a ton of time on social media.
Sure.
But a lot of that time now translates into me giving the actual paying clients attention, and sometimes, man, it takes a few seconds to respond to a text message or an email if
That's
it's a
fair.
quick question. And to me, if someone emails me and I see it and I can respond to them within 2-3 minutes of their emails, and I know that's going to leave a good taste in their mouth.
Hmm.
Like, especially if they need timely information or something, they feel good. Okay, boom, it's done. They're excited. They're happy. And that translates into reviews. 5-star. I have all the reviews I've gotten in my career are 5-star reviews. Like I've never gotten a 4-star review, and it's all there on Google.
Wow.
It's there every 5-star reviews. So in addition to giving them quality images, giving them giving them my time and great customer service, it all translates into those 5-star reviews, and that stuff goes a long way. So I just do the best I can, to keep my clients happy.
I love how practical you are about it. I'm a pretty emotional guy, and I tend to overanalyze and overthink. And I think a lot of photographers feel very similarly. So, for example, if they started to set the standard, which is if I see a message come in from any platform, I'm going to respond immediately. I think a lot of photographers kind of get carried away and then they get sucked into it. And then at 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night, they're still doing the same thing. And there's never a kind of a disconnect from work for the sake of their personal life, their personal relationships or otherwise. You don't strike me as one who has trouble with that. I just love the practical element of, you know what, it's there. It's not going to take me a long time. I do it. And what it results in is a much better client experience, which naturally, of course, builds your business.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I just feel we think about people who are on Twitter and tweeting every 5 seconds about nothing. Or people who are on Facebook arguing about nothing. Like,
yeah,
I don't put my time there. So I literally put my time to the things that matter, because time is the most important currency there is. So I kind of make it count where I focus my attention. And the way I respond to my clients is the way I respond to my friends, the way I respond to anyone. I am responsive. That's just my nature. And for me, it bugs me if someone reaches out to me and I can let them know right there and then it bugs me as a person. I just like being responsive.
Yeah.
I answer the phone. If I don't know who is calling, I don't screen calls. I answer unless it says scam likely or something. I might not. But what's funny? I have answered a scam likely call and it's a potential client. So now I answer scam likely calls just in case.
Wow.
Yeah, because sometimes if someone cold calls you off of Google, if your number is on Google and someone cold calls you, your phone might, your network might think it's a scam call because it's a number that they're not familiar with or something.
Sure.
And I've noticed that there were potential clients from that. So I'm like, okay, yeah, from now on, I'm answering every call that rings in my phone. I have been known to respond late hours of the night. Like somebody might email me at 12 a.m. thinking I'll answer it at 9 in the morning. In 5 minutes, the response comes because I'm awake. So why not? You know what I mean? That's just my attitude towards these things.
But I have a lot of respect for that actually, because I think, again, I tend to overthink things a little bit too much and I'm trying to compartmentalize work and personal life. You're just, as a kind of a principal, you're responsive to whoever it is that you're engaged with, friends, family, or clients. And you're not making that big of a deal about it. You're just getting it done. And again, I have a lot of respect for that. And I think it's good inspiration and reminder for all of us in that regard. I have one more question for you. And this is a very curious one. Is there a particular book or maybe audiobook or otherwise that you found inspiration from? And I'm actually thinking about this more from a photographic standpoint. Like, do you have a whole stack of coffee table books at home, street photography that you find inspiration from or on a regular basis? Or do you like other types of books? Is there a particular book or couple of books you would recommend to our listeners?
So I have, for photo books, I have The Suffering of Light by Alex Webb. It's a really cool book. And it's one that really, I forgot to mention him when I talked about inspirations. Because I have made pictures and people was like, oh, that looks like something Alex Webb would do. You know what I mean? And so clearly he has inspired some of my ideas, and the way he uses light in that book is really interesting. A lot of contrasty low-key images, harsh lights with lots of shadows. I also have David Allen Harvey's Cuba book. I'm a big fan of Cuba. I've been there three times in 3 years, and I've made a lot of awesome Cuba, I think, is one of the best places in the world for street photography because it's one of those places where I feel like if you ever wanted to boost your confidence as a photographer, you go to Cuba and you close your eyes and spray. And if you just close your eyes and turn around in 360 and spray. And when you look at your images, you probably have something really good in there. It's that good because life happens on the street. America, I think the street is a transitional place. People are going from one place to another.
Oh, wow. I like that distinction. Yeah.
And in Cuba, life is actually happening on the street. People are sitting on the streets. People have their living room, their house doors, apartment doors open, and as you're walking by, you can see all the way through their house, and they're like living. So they live on the street. So there's always something to photograph, and it's a very colorful country. The people, for some reason, the people match the environment. So, I've seen there's a picture my friend took, and it's a bus, and the bus has like blue and like a red top and like blue and I think yellow. And there's a guy sitting next to the bus with blue on, and he had a red hat, and he literally matched the outfit of the
Wow.
bus. I don't know if that was intentional, but those kind of things happen everywhere and just available all over the place. So sometimes you take a picture looking for something else, and when you review it, you see this other matching thing, and you're like, wow, I didn't even notice that, but it's there, and it just happens. It happens so often and often. So, yeah, I love Cuba. That's a little plug for Cuba. But yeah, those. So as far as inspirational books, those are some of the books. Another thing that has inspired me as a person, personal life and professional life, is the book is called The Secret.
Okay.
It talks about the law of attraction,
Mm-hmm.
the law of attraction, the energy in the universe, and stuff like that. And it was a pill that was a lot easier for me to swallow because if you when you kind of reference your life, or I reference my life, I could see how a lot of the things they talk about in the book, kind of like things that were kind of things that happened to me. So it's like, say for instance, you one day decide that you want to be a really good race car driver or the best race car driver, and that's all you think about, and you're always thinking about it. And one day you decide, I want to I'm going to get a car and start trying it out, and you just have that desire to be the best race car driver. Eventually, you probably can or will be one of the best race car drivers because you're really putting out that energy into the universe, and the universe hears you and creates a way for you to do it. Literally aligns things in the world for you to become that really great race car driver. I wanted to become a good photographer. I thought about it, and in 4 years or so, people knew who I was. Um, and, that was like, so I think about everything else in my life that has happened, and it came from me having a goal and really thinking about it and wanting it to happen. And they all just happen. And sometimes I wonder, how did this happen? And I really can't, it's not like I had a grand plan or I had this all, figured out. It just started with a dream or a goal, and the universe found a way. So that book is awesome. And there are even like smaller parts of it beyond just career and stuff. Some people want to, like, if you listen to like people like really successful people, Jim Carrey, um, Steve Harvey, Will Smith, a lot of the things they talk about when it comes to achieving dreams and success and stuff are all things that you would see in that book, The Secret. And it's all about the law of attraction and just wanting and just start. You want to be a comedian? Just start. Go out and start making jokes. One day you will be that good because you really want to be that good. You're going to put in the work, and the stars will align to allow you to do these things. So that's
So,
like, to me, one of the most. Yeah, go ahead.
oh no, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm just curious though too, because I know that there is a tendency in our culture. I've certainly been guilty of it as well. To, we talk about dreams, and that's kind of where it stops. There's a lot of conversation. There's a lot of thinking. But where I guess I would push back, I've never read The Secret. It does seem as though, at least based on my little bit of life experience so far, that when you not only put the idea out there, but then actually do something about it, that's where the doors start to open up. And I think it's important to make that distinction. We talked earlier about that. I mentioned the fact that you seem so practical, that you have this idea and you do the thing, right? Rather than overthinking, rather than overanalyzing and what if this happens and what if that happens and getting caught up in your emotion, you just do it. And again, I have a lot of respect for that, because not only is that a weakness for me at times, but I know that it is for a lot of photographers who tend to be more emotional types as well. So what do you think the element of doing and the practicality of doing what role does that play in this idea of the universe and the way that it makes way for you? Wouldn't you say that those who do are more likely, kind of like we were talking about earlier, it's not like if we sit around waiting for the luck of the draw, this beautiful thing to happen, this dream that we have in our head, but don't actually do anything about it. It seems like a lot of those people will never achieve that dream versus those who actually go and do and work, and the intention translates to action. It seems like those are the people that get results. What are your thoughts?
Yes, I really do believe that being open to trying things is important. Like, I'll give an example. So for me, I said I wanted to be a great photographer, right? And then I also decided that I would say yes to anything that made me uncomfortable. So speaking, I never liked public speaking. I remember in college, I'll give presentations and I would freeze up. I forget one line and I freeze up in front of the class. Now I public speak. I speak at conferences. I host photography workshops. I'm talking to you now. This is public, right? I'm talking to you now. Yeah. So there's having the dream and wanting something to happen. But if you're just stagnant and not doing anything, like, you might say you want to be a millionaire today, right? Then a cryptocurrency opportunity comes knocking on the door. And you're like, no, I know I'm not going to put $25 here or $1,000 there. I'm not going to do it. That might have been the opening, the law of attraction. That would have been the universe might have presented that, hey, here is your $1 million opportunity. I might not tell you that it is, but if you act on something, you might get that result, right? So you have to act. You have to do something. If you want to be the best photographer, you need to get a camera and start shooting. If you want to be a good one, you have to act on something. And as long as you act, I believe the universe will make a way for things to happen. Even if you never saw the path in the future, you'll be able to connect the dots and look back and be like, oh wow, this is how it was all supposed to happen. And this was the dream, but this is how, now that I'm here, I can see how it all pieced together to make it happen. So you definitely need to act, especially if it's something you want. You just can't sit on your couch and expect that you'll one day be one of the best photographers if you don't ever pick up a camera and shoot.
I think you summed up our conversation beautifully at this point. And it feels honestly like we've only scratched the surface. There's so much I don't know about you and your work, and I'm sure all the technique that goes into the work that you create. You mentioned that you do some mentoring, teaching workshops, this type of thing. Can you share a little bit about how our listeners can learn a little bit more about those opportunities to learn from you?
So right now, I have a Patreon. So my Patreon is, if you search my name, Patreon/Kanayo Adibe, you would find it. And there I post content, video content on different ideas, my different ideas with photography. From how I make certain images, I talk about light, I talk about textures, I talk about, composition. I do critiques of images. I mentor. I have people who are, taking mentorship classes from me. I also used to host, prior to the pandemic, I hosted in-person workshops, and that you can find on my website. But I haven't, as of right now, I don't know what I'm going to be doing with that. Just because of the pandemic. But for now, the Patreon is active and I'm always posting content there and sharing with other photographers.
Yeah, and I've actually got that pulled up on the screen here for anybody who's listening in. All you have to do is go to patreon.com/Kanayo, Kanayo Adibe, Adibe. We'll link to this, of course, in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. But I appreciate you sharing that, Kanayo, because ultimately I want our listeners to be able to come to you for more advice, to learn more. Because I feel like we've only scratched the surface on a very loaded topic, not just street photography, but your wedding photography. And to that end, I also just want to pull up here one more of the pages on your website, because your work is just beautiful. We talk about the significance of composition. And for those of you listening in, if you go to kanayoadibe.com and go to portfolio and weddings, I'm just scrolling through this page here. and your just stunning eye for composition is readily visible here as I just scroll down the page. Truly beautiful work, Kanayo, and I have to say again that like this is far and above beyond what I ever accomplished as a photographer. A lot of respect for you in that regard, and I really appreciate you sharing with all of our listeners today.
Well, thank you, man. I appreciate it, and thanks for having me.
Well, it truly has been a privilege. And for everybody listening in, again, we'll link to all the resources that we mentioned, the books, the URLs, the talking points, everything in the show notes at bokehpodcast.com. Make sure you check that out. Thank you, everybody, for hanging out, for listening in. Thanks once again, Kanayo. I really appreciate your time.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.